When it comes to looking at great defenses in the NHL, it does not take long to look at the Carolina Hurricanes, which have been a top 5 in the last few years in the Rod Brind'Amour era. But according to Thomas Hickey, they're not part of his top 5. In that instance, where should the Hurricanes be ranked, and who should they be over when it comes to the best defenses in the league?
You're Locked On Hurricanes, your daily podcast on the Carolina Hurricanes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you to the Everyday for making this your first listen of the day, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, talking everything about your Carolina Hurricanes. I am your host, Zach Martin. I'm the credentialed Carolina Hurricanes beat writer over at the Hockey Hours, also the co-host of the Surgecast, which is a weekly Carolina Hurricanes podcast, along with all of my duties here at Locked On Hurricanes. On the Monday edition of the pod, we're going to go over Thomas Hickey's top 5 defense list and why it's interesting how there are some teams there that really shouldn't be and why the Hurricanes have to be in that top 5 because it's their bread and butter. It just works perfectly. We're going to compare and contrast that list and looking at this defense and kind of being like, okay, where is this coming from? And then at the end, where should the Hurricanes defense be ranked when it comes into the NHL? Because like I said, it's basically their bread and butter. That's what they're known for. But this episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKDOWNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Now, the NHL Network on Sunday, August 3rd in the morning dropped their top defensive units according to Thomas Hickey. Now, Thomas Hickey is a studio color analyst and a former NHL defenseman. He works for the New York Islanders works at, Isles on MSGSN up in the area. And then, of course, he's part of the NHL Network. So, according to Thomas Hickey, the former defenseman, former New York Islander, now who works for, like I said, MSNG, covering the Islanders, he has the Colorado Avalanche at number 1, the Florida Panthers at number 2, the Dallas Stars at number 3, Washington Capitals 4, and the Montreal Canadiens 5. So, looking at his top 5 list, I'm already having questions and going, where is this coming from and why are these teams so high? Now, it comes to the Florida Panthers. Yeah, I mean, it's a team that is definitely good on defense. They did, Nate Schmidt's not coming back, but this is a Florida Panthers team that's basically not having a lot of turnover, and their defense was good last year. So I could see Florida being on this list. Second, I would say maybe it's a little low. They're a really good defense. I definitely say they're in the top 5. But behind the Colorado Avalanche, I am, like I said, we'll go through the actual defenses and looking at the actual guys they have on there. Initial thoughts, I'm not sure about Colorado being at number 1. Obviously, they got Kel McCarr, yes, and they got Devon Toews, but they just recently signed Brent Burns. But other than that, I'm not sure Colorado's number 1. Dallas, a lot of questions last year with Dallas was their one side of their defense was really good, and the other side of their defense was very questionable. I'm not sure how I feel with Dallas being at 3. Washington Capitals 4 is probably the most egregious name on this list because for me, especially in the playoffs, Washington did almost nothing to the Hurricanes. Hurricanes took care of them in 5 games. But even then, Washington doesn't really – I just don't see Washington having a top 5 defense in the league. And, yeah, Montreal did get Noah Dobson in the offseason, but Montreal Canadiens at 5, though? Even, just going through, comments and looking from Montreal fans, even they think that, yeah, their defense is good, but they don't think they're a top 5 defense. So when you look at Thomas Hickey's list, I'm just not really sure where a lot of these teams, where do these teams come at when it comes to this? Because there's a lot of teams that I think have better defenses than some of these top 5. But I just don't see them, a lot of them being a top 5 team. That's the thing. It's like I said, if you're looking at Montreal, it's a lot of offense, not in terms of actual defense. Washington is a very big stretch move with them being even top 10, top 5 even, is kind of insane to me. At least he didn't put the Islanders there, because then I'd be like, okay, what are we actually doing here? I would say the two teams that make the most sense in terms of a possible top 5 would probably be Colorado and Florida. Dallas is a bit of a stretch. Washington and Montreal, I believe, shouldn't even be in that top 5. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Then I'm curious, so where does he think the Hurricanes are at? Because it's only a top 5 list. Does he have them in the top 10? Because if he doesn't have them in the top 10, then we really have a discussion here. Because what are we doing? Because the Carolina Hurricanes as a whole are known for their defense. Jacob Slavin's the best defensive defenseman in the league. It just makes sense. You see the emergence of Jalen Chatfield being a top 4 defenseman in the league. You can look at Shane Gostisbehere and Sean Walker being other top 4 guys in the league on any other roster. Same thing for Keandre Miller, a top 4 guy on a lot of teams, even with the Rangers. He's a top 4 guy. Yeah, maybe he hasn't unlocked his full potential, but that's what the Hurricanes are good at. You have Alexander Nikish, who's coming to his first season, his first full season, really. I mean, he didn't really play the regular season games last year. All he played was playoff games. But probably he's considered the best defenseman coming out of the KHL, and he looks someone who could really shine in the AHL. Just getting used to the ice, ice play, play on the ice, getting used to the shorter ice surface, of course, the physicality of the league, stuff like that. But then, even then, if you look at Mike Riley as a good 7th defenseman, that's probably their best 7th defenseman they've had in a while. So I'm not really curious. I'm just curious to see why the Hurricanes aren't within the top 5 when you talk about defenses for a team that's known for their defense. They're a top 5 defense every single season. They're the top penalty kill unit every single season. And I know it's not really talking about defense in terms of PK, but still, like, the Hurricanes deploy their defenseman on the PK a lot. I just don't see where they're not in the top 5, and there are some teams on this list that are kind of very questionable in terms of that. So, like I said, Thomas Hickey's list includes, like I said, the Colorado Avalanche, the Florida Panthers, Dallas Stars, Washington Capitals, and the Montreal Canadiens. Like I said, just read the list out loud. It's kind of like, it's quite, like I said, it's very questionable. Like I said, the two teams that probably make the most sense, Colorado, Florida. Dallas is a little bit of a stretch, but Washington and Montreal, I don't see that. I don't see them being top 5 teams. Because just looking at when you, like, I listed the Hurricanes defense, you're already thinking Slavin's a top 2 defenseman on a lot of rosters. Then you got 4 other guys that are considered top 4 defensemen anywhere else in Chatfield, Miller, Gostisbehere, and Walker. Easily top 4 defensemen on other rosters. And then you have your young guy in Alexander Nikish, who you still have to figure, like, get him used to the system, getting used to playing in the NHL and stuff like that. But you're talking about 5 out of 6 guys in the Hurricanes that are top 4 defensemen on any other roster. For me, that should be clearly enough to be a top 5 defense in the league just by depth alone. And like I said, you've had Mike Riley, who's got a lot of NHL experience, who has been top 4 in other teams, maybe at least top 6 more than anything else. So it's just, I don't see where the disconnect is of where you're looking at some teams that clearly aren't top 5s, and the Hurricanes aren't a top 5 with the guys they had. If this was a top 10 list and the Hurricanes were in the 10, I would be like, okay, there is a little bit more discussion of what the list should look like, but we're just going off of top 5, and with certain names that are there, shouldn't be top 5, and the Hurricanes should be. So we're going to go through all 5 of those teams and then look at the Hurricanes and see where the compare and contrast is, and see who really shouldn't be there. So stick around. We'll talk about it here in a second on a Monday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control of your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can check all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So, in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. And the good thing about Monarch Money is if you're sharing accounts with your significant other, it's a great way for you to stay on the same page with knowing where your finances are at and how you can budget to save money moving forward. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONAHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONAHL for half off your first year. Welcome back to segment 2 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. So, we did initial thoughts on the top 5 list for Thomas Hickey, but let's look through the actual 5 defenses that were listed and where do the Hurricanes stack up. So, we're going to go 1 through 5 in order and going to look at these teams. First up, the Colorado Avalanche, Devon Toews, Cale Makar, top pairing. Okay, totally makes sense. Cale Makar is probably one of the top 5 defensemen, or top 5 defensemen in the league. I would definitely say probably in the top 3 more than anything else. Second pairing, Sam Girard and Josh Manson. It's okay. It's an okay pairing, but not really much world beaters or guys that you'd be like, okay, yeah, I could definitely see him in the top 4. Then Sam Malinsky and then Brent Burns. Now we know how Brent Burns is. Really good defenseman over the last couple of years. Not so much this past season. There, of course, he was dealing with an injury. Did see a little bit of a step go down. Had a lot of ice time. Third pairing, Brent Burns makes sense. I know a lot of people wanted to see that for the Hurricanes, but that looks like what's going to be for Brent Burns and the Colorado Avalanche with Sam Malinsky. I wouldn't say that third defensive pairing is the greatest or even a top 5 third pairing. The second pairing is okay. I see where they're coming from, Sam Jordan and Josh Manson. They've been pretty decent for the Avalanche over the last few years, but it's that top pairing of Devon Toews and Cale Makar, I think that sends the Avalanche defense forward on a lot of lists just because Devon Toews is really good as a defensive defenseman, probably definitely top 10 in the league, maybe top 5 if you put him behind Jacob Slavin. And, of course, the top 3 defensemen in the league, maybe a lot considered him as probably the best defenseman in the NHL in Cale Makar. I definitely put him in the top 3. Other than that, second D pairing is okay. Third pairing, I'm not really sure that this warrants a number 1 unit in terms of that, but we'll say that it's okay, but I'm not really sure where that looks like for that. So, looking at the Florida Panthers, Gustav Forsling, Aaron Ekblad, makes sense. Nico Mikkola, absolute terror in the playoffs. Seth Jones, who basically revived his career after leaving Chicago and going to Florida. Dmitry Kulikov and Jeff Petrie is the one that replaced him for Nate Schmidt. Not going to lie, yeah, I see where, Thomas Hickey looks at the Florida Panthers being a number 2. I would say if you're looking at this compared to the Colorado Avalanche, I think the Panthers, if we're just going off a top 5 list alone, what Thomas Hickey put, I would say Florida's number 1. Just by looking at this and know what they've done as back-to-back Cup champs and adding Seth Jones and all that, Florida's out of these 5 teams that are listed, Florida is definitely number 1. So yeah, that's a good defense. 2, I think 2 might be a little low, but if you're talking about this top 5, yeah, Florida should definitely be there just by that alone. Now, looking at the Dallas Stars, like I said, a lot of Stars fans questioned, one side of the defense compared to the other. And looking at this list, Esa Lindell, Mira Heiskanen, yeah, that's a really good top unit, especially with Heiskanen in there. Thomas Harley, Ilya Lyubushkin. A lot of people question Lyubushkin being on that right side, and even before, too, when they had some other guys on that group, it's like, I don't know about that. Thomas Harley's really got himself to be a good defenseman in the league. Then Leon Bischel and Niles Lundqvist. That third pairing is very questionable. The second pairing is even more questionable outside of Thomas Harley. That top defensive unit of Lindell and Heiskanen, yeah, I get it's good. It's a good defense, but top 3 When you have to question 3 of your top 6, I'm not really of your 6 defensemen. I'm not really sure that Dallas being a number 3 defense makes a lot of sense. So, like I said, with the other 2 teams we're ready to talk about, Dallas being 3rd is really high. When you look at outside of Lindell, Heiskanen, and Harley, very questionable in terms of their defense. Now, moving on to the Washington Capitals, I think this where Washington and Montreal gets very, very interesting. So, Jacob Chychrun, John Carlson. Yeah, Chychrun has gotten a little bit better with the Washington Capitals. John Carlson. He's always been a great defenseman in terms of the Capitals. Rasmus Sandin, I mean, he's gotten better since being with Toronto, but he's okay. I wouldn't say he's, lighting the world on fire. Then Matt Roy, former LA King. He's good, but I don't see where, just if I look at this top 4, I don't see the Capitals being a top 5 defense. Then Martin Ferravari, who's gotten better over time, but I still think needs a little bit more time to prove. And then Trevor Van Riemsdyk, a former Carolina Hurricanes, he's good, but this defense for Washington doesn't scream number 4 in the NHL. You could maybe say it's a stretch for a top 10, but 4th? Outside of Chychrun and Carlson, it's an okay defense, but I'm still not sold on how this is a number 4 team. When you look at a Reclamation in Sandin, Matt Roy gets out of LA. Ferravari's gotten better over time, but still is a long way to go, in my opinion. And Van Riemsdyk is good, but he's not really setting the world up to, be like, oh yeah, TVR is a really great defenseman. He's top 20 in the league or top 25 or whatever. So yeah, this is where I'm very questioning this list really comes in with Washington. Dallas was a stretch. Washington is beyond a stretch in terms of being like, really, why are they here? And then let's look at the Montreal Canadiens, where it's a lot of offense, but if you're talking strictly defense in the defense sense, there is not a lot of defense when it comes to this list. It's a young core, that's for sure. But 5, when you have Caden Gooley, who's a young kid, and you just traded for Noah Dobson, that's a young group with a lot of offensive upside, but that's 2 very young guys carrying this, group. You got Lane Hudson and Jaden Struble. Lane Hudson's a really good defenseman, for being a young kid. And James Struble is, getting there too. He's a good defenseman, but then you got Mike Matheson and Alexander Carrier. Matheson and Carrier are okay. They're good defensemen, but I think a lot of people are looking at this Canadiens defense as being a too high. Like, I think they're overhyping the Canadiens defense because of young guys who have offensive upsides, but where's the defensive aspect when it comes to the Carolina? When you look at other teams, I just don't see where Montreal is. Like I said, this is where 3, 4, 5, as you go down that number of go to Dallas, Washington, and Montreal, I'm very questioning this group starts picking up, and just reading through that is very questionable because here's the Carolina Hurricanes. If you're looking at their 6, daily faceoff, but this is what they currently have. Keandre Miller, Jacob Slavin, with Jacob Slavin being on his offside. If there's anyone who could do it on the Carolina Hurricanes, it's definitely Jacob Slavin. But let's just say this is the list. Miller, Slavin, top line. Miller, top 4 defenseman on the Rangers, looking for a bounce back after a down season. Of course, the whole Rangers team had a down season. Jacob Slavin, the best defenseman in the NHL. Alexander Nikishin coming into his first full regular season with Jalen Sheffield. Jalen Sheffield, like I said, definitely has made himself into a top 4 defenseman. And then Shane Gostisbehere and Sean Walker. Of course, we all know how good the Ghost Walker line pairing was as the season went on, especially in the playoffs. I would say when you look at this list, this is probably the most deepest defense in terms of depth out of the top 5. Where I'm not going like, okay, this guy's okay, this guy's okay, this guy's okay. This group has proven time and time again, especially last season, that when the whole group is going, they're the best shutdown. That's why I feel like when you listen to the top five that Thomas Hickey put out, and then look at the Carolina Hurricanes defense, I don't see where the Hurricanes aren't a top five team in terms of defense. When you look at the other ones, you're like, okay, I'm questioning half of Dallas's defense. Washington's got a couple good guys, but that's still very questionable. Then Montreal is a bunch of young guys with offense, but where's the defense aspect of that? With the Hurricanes, you have the defensive aspect and the offensive aspect, and a lot of versatility on those lines. So, yeah, I definitely think that as you went down that list from Dallas to Washington to Montreal, you start questioning it a lot more. Colorado, if you're talking that top five, definitely needs to be, I think, probably 2, maybe 3. Florida, yeah, Florida's a really good defense. I'd say that they should be 1 if we're talking strictly that top 5. But where should the Hurricanes defense be ranked in terms of the NHL? Stick around. I'll give you my list here in a second on a Monday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Welcome back to segment 3 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. All right, so we gave you the initial thoughts on Thomas Hickey's top 5, went compared and contrasted his top 5, and now where do I think the Carolina Hurricanes should be in terms of looking at the defense as a whole? Now, for me, this is very interesting of how it's going to play out, because if you look at some of the guys, you look around the league, I would definitely say there's a lot of question marks in terms of other defenses. But I think when you look at it's a very weird the top 5 that Thomas Hickey put out is very weird. I would definitely say if you're talking top 5, I love the Hurricanes. I'm going to be straight up. I'm not going to homer this pick in. But I'd say number 1 is the Florida Panthers. It's just that is a very legit group, back-to-back champs. I cannot put the Hurricanes at 1, just because you guys know how much I love the defense, especially a lot of guys on that group. But got to be honest, Florida's got a really good defense. I definitely say that they're number 1. Now, I will say this though, Carolina, they are the second best defense in the NHL. I don't know why people think that they're not top 5. If they're top 10, there's a conversation. But not being a top 5, I think it's crazy. If you look at what they've done year in and year out, and the thing is, yes, they got younger with Miller and Nikishin, but you're talking a lot of offensive upside and some good defense out of those guys as well. It's just fine-tuning it a little bit more, get the rough edges done, maybe take Miller to the next level, ease Nikishin and get him used to the NHL. I think this is a very good defense. So I would say the Hurricanes are definitely number 2 on this list. Number 3, I'm going to go with the Minnesota Wild, and I think the Minnesota Wild defense gets very, very overlooked when it comes to the NHL in terms of their defense, because you got Jacob Middleton, that when he's healthy, he's a very good defenseman that doesn't get enough credit. Brock Faber is a really good defenseman as well. I mean, he's young, still has a lot of good, years left in him, obviously, and the fact that he's a good defenseman that's got some good defense and good offense as well. Then you look at Steve Buum. I hope I'm saying that right. Young kid, but really, really good on the defense. Really young, but there's a lot of ceiling for him, and I think he's going to have a very good NHL career. Captain Jared Spurgeon. I mean, it's Jared Spurgeon, another good defenseman as well. You look at 3 of that out of that top 4 groups, out of the 4 guys, that is a very good 3 guys out of your top 4. Carson Lambos, a guy who's young, still trying, make it work for himself. And then Zach Bogosian. Bogosian's been there and done that in the NHL, and he's a good defenseman as well. So if you're looking at a defense, I would say give me the Minnesota Wild at 3. I think it's a very good group in terms of that. And then you look at, then I would say the Colorado Avalanche are 4. I think Colorado is definitely a top 5 defense, but give me them into the 4 at 4 behind Minnesota. I think now you're talking about a really good defense when it comes to that. And then if you're looking at 5, I am going to give credit where it's due, and I'm going to the New Jersey Devils with the 5th best defense. Brandon Dillon, very good former Winnipeg Jet. Dougie Hamilton, former Hurricane, former Boston Bruin. If he stays healthy, Dougie is a good defenseman. Luke Hughes, very young, but there's a lot of promise to his career. Brett Pesce, we all know about Brett. Love Brett. Very, very good defenseman. Definitely top 4 in the league. Jonas Siegenthaler, when he's on the ice, he's an absolute menace, and he's a shutdown guy as well. And then Simon Nemec. Nemec is another good young defenseman, too. I would definitely say that you could almost put New Jersey at 4, but just because of the fact you get the Cale Makar factor and what Devontae's can do and some of the other guys on that group, I would definitely say that it's a close 4 between Colorado and New Jersey. But I would definitely say New Jersey is a top 5 defense in the league when you look at the group that they have. So my top 5 list is going to be the Florida Panthers, the Carolina Hurricanes, Minnesota Wild, Colorado Avalanche, and the New Jersey Devils. You could flip 4 and 5, but it's a very close 4 or 5. But yeah, so you look at Thomas Hickey's list. He's got Colorado, Florida, Dallas, Washington, Montreal. That's the group he's going with in his top 5. Like I said, my top 5, Florida, Carolina, Minnesota, Colorado, New Jersey. So if you're in the comments, let me know, which top 5 would you go with? Would you go with Thomas Hickey's top 5 or my top 5? And then if you think there's a team that maybe is getting overlooked out of both of our lists, let me know what you think. What would your top 5 NHL defenses be? Leave them in the comments here on the YouTube. If you're on X or social media, hit me up at OneTrueZach on X or LO_Hurricanes. Let me know what your top 5 list would be for when it comes to NHL defense. But like I said, so one more quick recap. For this is Thomas Hickey's list. Colorado, Florida, Dallas, Washington, Montreal. Mine is going to be Florida, Carolina, Minnesota, Colorado, and New Jersey. So like I said, let me know in the comments. Let me know what you think. Do you like my top 5? Do you like Thomas Hickey's top 5? Which I don't think a lot of people are. But let me know in the comments what you think and what will your top 5 defenses be. So, you know what? Let them still underestimate Carolina because that's what, a lot of national media does. They want to just not give Carolina the credit it deserves. So it's just another day where the Hurricanes all right, that's fine. Just underestimate us. Don't give us the credit we deserve. It's fine. We'll just keep proving to you time and time again that there's very good hockey in Carolina. The defense is really good, and I wouldn't get to disrespect levels, but the underrated why you keep leaving us out factor, I think it's definitely there when it comes to that. But it's going to be very interesting to see how the Carolina Hurricanes do this season, but I think the defense is getting once again overlooked, and knowing this group, especially when your assistant coach is Tim Gleason who runs the defense, they have no problem in proving people wrong. It's going to be very fun to watch this defense grow as the season goes on, and we are getting another week closer, and I'm ready for Hurricanes hockey to definitely be back. So then, guys, this will be the Friday edition of Monday of Locked On Hurricanes. Thank you for making your first listen today. Go check out the Locked On podcast where there is no offseason, bringing you the daily league white stories that matter the most with the local coverage you love from Locked On. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. If you want to keep up with me, I'm at OneTrueZach on X. The podcast is LO_Hurricanes. I'm also on Blue Sky at the Zachary Martin. We can click the links in my bios to find all of my written content at thehockeywriters.com. If you want to check out my other podcasts, it's the Searchcast on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. For Locked On Hurricanes, you can find us on Spotify, Google, Apple, iHeartRadio, wherever you listen to your podcast. Make sure to follow, subscribe, and leave a 5-star rating and review because I might just read it on the show. For YouTube, it's Locked On Hurricanes. Subscribe, hit the bell notification so you don't miss a show. Hit the thumbs up to let me know if you like the show as well. Share with all our Kiniacs to become everydayers just like you. But hope everyone enjoyed the Monday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Enjoy your Monday. We are getting another day and another week closer to Carolina Hurricanes hockey being back. But until next time, as always, let's go Canes.